Hello, and welcome. Tonight, we are going to spend some time in a place that has existed in one form or another for as long as people have traveled: the tavern, the inn, the public house. But we're not visiting during the busy midday rush or the raucous evening crowd. Instead, we're settling in for the quiet hours, the slow stretch of evening that moves into night, when the day's urgency has passed and a different kind of time takes over. Picture an 18th century coaching inn somewhere in the English countryside. It's autumn, perhaps October, when the days grow short and the evenings cool. The year might be 1780, or 1765, or 1795, it doesn't matter too much. The rhythms, we'll observe, remained remarkably constant throughout this period. So find a comfortable position, let yourself settle, and we'll step together through the heavy wooden door, into the warmth and lamplight, into the gentle hum of tavern life after dark. The approach before we enter: let's walk the road that brings us here. The coaching road is rutted and dusty, or muddy, depending on recent weather. Let's say it's been dry, so dust rises with each step, pale in the fading light. The sun has already set, though the western sky still holds a lingering glow of deep orange, fading to purple. In the east, the first stars have appeared. The air has that particular coolness that comes with autumn evenings, not yet the deep cold of winter, but sharp enough to make you appreciate the thought of a warm fire. You've been walking for hours, perhaps, or riding in a coach that stopped earlier to let you down. Your feet are tired, your shoulders ache from the weight of your traveling bag. The prospect of rest, of warmth, of a meal and a bed, has been pulling you forward for the last few miles. And now, you see it, the warm glow of lamplight and windows, the shape of a substantial building against the darkening sky, and most welcoming of all, a painted sign hanging above the door, creaking slightly in the evening breeze. The sign shows a red lion, or perhaps a white horse, or a crown, whatever name this particular establishment bears. Smoke rises from multiple chimneys, gray against the twilight sky. You can smell it even from a distance: wood smoke, with hints of cooking food beneath it. There's a stable yard to one side, where you can hear horses moving in their stalls, the occasional snort or stamp. As you draw closer, you hear voices, not loud or raucous, but the gentle murmur of conversation, occasional laughter, the clink of crockery and glass. It's an inviting sound, speaking of fellowship and warmth and civilization in the midst of the rural darkness. You reach the door. It's heavy oak, dark with age, fitted with iron hardware that has been polished by countless hands. There's a particular weight to doors like this, a solidity that speaks of permanence, of shelter. You grasp the iron latch, press down, push the door open, and step inside. First impressions: the first thing that strikes you is the warmth. After the cool evening air, the interior of the tavern feels almost tropical. The heat comes from a large fireplace. We'll examine it more closely in a moment, but for now, just feel that wash of warmth across your cold face and hands. The second thing is the light. After the gathering darkness outside, the interior seems bright, though by our standards, it would be quite dim. The light comes from the fire, from candles and sconces on the walls, from oil lamps on tables. It's golden, flickering, creating pools of brightness and deep shadows. The third thing is the smell. Its complex wood smoke dominates, but beneath it, you detect cooking food, ale, lamp oil, damp wool from travel-worn clothing, old tobacco smoke absorbed into the wooden beams and plaster walls over decades. It's not unpleasant, this smell. It's the smell of human habitation, of comfort, of life being lived. The space you've entered is the common room, the heart of the inn. It's not particularly large, perhaps 20 feet by 30, but it feels spacious enough. The ceiling is low, supported by dark wooden beams. The walls are plastered and whitewashed, though darkened by smoke and age in the upper reaches near the ceiling. The floor is flagstone near the fireplace and door, where traffic is heaviest, but transitions to worn wooden planks further into the room. Years of foot traffic have smoothed these planks, given them a gentle undulation, created subtle paths worn deeper than the surrounding wood. There are tables, solid, heavy things made of dark oak, their surfaces marked by years of use. Some are round, some rectangular. Benches line the walls, and there are a few individual chairs, though not many. Near the fire, there are high-back settles, wooden benches with tall backs designed to block drafts and capture heat. The fire lets move toward that fireplace now, the great heart of the room. It dominates the far wall, a massive opening of brick and stone, large enough that you could almost walk into it. And indeed, the fire burning within is sized to match. This is not a modest parlor fire, but a working fire, meant to heat the entire common room and provide heat for cooking. The logs are substantial, thick pieces of oak or ash, slow-burning woods that provide steady, lasting heat. They rest on iron fire dogs, elevated slightly above the stone hearth floor, allowing air to circulate beneath them. The fire has been burning all day, and the logs have developed that particular deep glow of well-established coals, white hot at the core, with flames licking up lazily, almost meditatively, from the surface. The heat is intense if you stand close. You can feel it on your face and hands, soaking into your travel-chilled body. There's something primal about a fire like this. Something that speaks to us at a level deeper than conscious thought. This is warmth. This is light. This is safety against the darkness outside. On the hearth itself, pushed to the side, away from the hottest part of the fire, sit various implements: an iron poker for adjusting the logs, a small shovel for managing coals, tongs for moving wood. There's also a large pot suspended from an iron crane that swings over the fire. Inside, something simmers gently, occasionally bubbling up with a soft plopping sound. The smell suggests it's a pottage or stew, probably containing vegetables, perhaps some meat, barley to thicken it. Near the fire, in one of those high-back settles, sits an elderly man smoking a long clay pipe. He's not doing anything else, not reading or talking to anyone, just sitting, smoking, watching the fire. His eyes reflect the flames, and his expression is one of complete contentment. He's a regular here, clearly. This is his spot, his time of day, his routine. The innkeeper, a figure, emerges from a doorway at the back of the room. The innkeeper, the master of this establishment. He's a substantial man, perhaps in his 50s, with a ruddy face and a leather apron tied over his waistcoat and breeches. His sleeves are rolled up, revealing forearms that speak of years of lifting barrels and carrying heavy loads. His expression is one of professional welcome, not effusive, but genuinely friendly. He's assessing you even as he approaches, making quick judgments about what kind of guest you'll be. Are you quality, a gentleman or lady of means, or more modest in your station? It matters, not in terms of whether you'll be served. This is a public house, open to all who can pay, but in terms of what level of service and accommodation you will be offered. Good evening to you, he says, his voice carrying the local accent, but clear and practiced. Welcome to the Red Lion. You'll be wanting a bed for the night, I expect? You confirm that you are indeed seeking lodging, and perhaps a meal. He nods, wiping his hands on his apron in a habitual gesture. We can accommodate you, certainly. Have you eaten? My wife has a fine mutton stew on tonight, and there's a good meat pie left from dinner service. Ale or cider with your meal? We've both fresh drawn. As he talks, he's leading you toward a table, not too close to the fire. Those places are taken by regulars, but at a respectable distance where you will be comfortable. He's done this thousands of times before, this welcoming of strangers, this provision of hospitality. It's his craft, his livelihood, and he takes a quiet pride in doing it well. The other guests, as you settle at your table, you have a chance to observe the other occupants of the common room. There aren't many. This is a quiet evening, a busy night, but each person present is part of the tapestry of inn life. At a table near the window sit two men who appear to be farmers or tradesmen, judging by their rough work clothes and weathered hands. They're nursing tankards of ale and talking in low voices, their conversation punctuated by long, comfortable silences. They might be brothers, or perhaps just neighbors who meet here regularly. Their ale consumption is steady but moderate. This is clearly social drinking, not a rush toward intoxication. In the corner, a woman sits alone, unusual in itself, but her bearing suggests respectability. She's perhaps 40, dressed in a traveling cloak and bonnet, both of good quality but somewhat worn. A widow, perhaps, or a housekeeper, traveling on some errand for her employer. She's eating bread and cheese with careful, precise movements, and occasionally glances at a small book she has propped open beside her plate. In the candlelight, you can't quite make out what she's reading. Near the fire, besides the elderly pipe smoker, there's a younger man, maybe 25 or 30, who has the look of a traveling tradesman about him. His leather satchel sits at his feet, and he's writing something in a ledger by the light of a candle, occasionally pausing to calculate on his fingers or consult a small notebook. An itinerant merchant, perhaps, or a factor traveling on business for a larger concern. And there's a couple middle-aged, sitting close together on a bench, speaking quietly. They might be husband and wife, or perhaps longtime companions. There's an ease between them, a lack of need to fill every moment with talk. They simply are, together, sharing this space and time. The meal arrives. The innkeeper's wife emerges from the kitchen, a doorway behind a wooden screen that partially divides the common room from the working areas of the house. She's a capable-looking woman, perhaps a few years younger than her husband, with graying hair tucked under a clean cap and an apron that shows signs of recent cooking. She carries a wooden tray with your meal. First, she sets down a pewter tankard ale, foaming slightly at the top, the liquid a warm amber color in the lamplight. Then comes a broad wooden trencher, a thick slice of bread that serves as an edible plate, and on top of this, a generous portion of the mutton stew. The stew steams gently, and the smell makes your mouth water. You can see chunks of mutton, pieces of turnip and carrot, perhaps some onion, all in a thick, gravy-like liquid. It's simple food, but honest and nourishing, the kind of meal that has sustained travelers for centuries. She also provides a pewter spoon and a knife, the knife from the inn's supply, as you'd be expected to carry your own usually. But the innkeeper's wife makes accommodations for travelers who might not be so equipped. "There you are then," she says with a brief smile. "Call if you need aught else." You thank her, and she returns to the kitchen, moving with the efficient grace of someone who knows exactly what needs doing and how to do it without wasted motion. The meal. Let's take our time with this meal. There's no need to rush. The night stretches ahead, and this moment, this simple act of eating after a long day of travel, deserves attention. You lift the spoon. It's well-worn pewter, slightly bent from years of use, but clean. The first spoonful of stew is almost too hot, but you blow on it gently, watching the steam curl away in the lamplight. When you taste it, the flavors are straightforward, but satisfying. The mutton is rich and slightly fatty, cooked long enough that it's tender. The vegetables have absorbed the meat's flavor, and the broth has been thickened with barley, giving it body and substance. There's salt, certainly, and perhaps a bit of pepper, but no complex spicing. This is English cooking of the period, which favored simplicity over elaboration for everyday meals. The bread trencher beneath the stew gradually softens as it absorbs the gravy, and by the time you've eaten most of the stew proper, the bread has become deliciously saturated and flavorful. You eat this too, using the knife to cut it into manageable pieces, each bite a combination of the bread's texture and the stew's savory goodness. The ale is good, not strong by our standards, perhaps, but flavorful, with a slight sourness that is characteristic of ale of this period before modern brewing techniques standardized the taste. It's refreshing after the rich stew, and the slight alcohol content brings a pleasant warmth to your chest. As you eat, you're aware of the sounds around you, the crackle of the fire, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional clink of pewter or pottery. Someone's chair scrapes against the floor. The elderly man by the fire taps his pipe against the hearth to knock out the spent tobacco, then begins the process of refilling and relighting it. Outside, you hear a dog bark once, then fall silent. The wind has picked up slightly, and you can hear it moving in the chimney, making the fire flutter and dance. The rhythm of service. While you eat, the innkeeper's wife makes periodic appearances, checking on guests, removing empty plates, refilling tankards. Her service is quiet and efficient. She doesn't hover or interrupt, but she's attentive, noticing when something is needed almost before the guest realizes it themselves. The innkeeper himself moves between the common room and what must be the taproom or cellar beyond, occasionally descending stairs with an empty pitcher and returning with it full of ale fresh from the cask. There's a rhythm to his movements, a pattern established by long practice. At one point, A young girl appears, perhaps 12 or 13, almost certainly their daughter or an apprentice of some sort. She carries an armload of wood for the fire, stacking it neatly beside the hearth where it can dry and be ready when needed. She performs this task with casual competence, then disappears back through the kitchen doorway. This is a family business, you realize, and not just in terms of ownership. The whole family works together, each person with their role, their responsibilities. There's a kind of choreography to it, a dance of domestic industry that has been perfected over years. Lamplight and shadows. As you finish your meal and sit back with the remains of your ale, you become more aware of the quality of light in the room. We're so accustomed to bright, even, electric light, that we forget what light was like before. How much dimmer, how much more dramatic, how much more intimate. The candles in their wall sconces burn with small, wavering flames. Each candle creates a sphere of light around itself, fading gradually into shadow. The shadows are deep, almost velvety in their darkness. The corners of the room are barely visible, existing more as suggestions than as clearly defined spaces. The fire provides the most light, but it's inconsistent, brightening and dimming as the flames rise and fall, as logs shift and settle. Objects and people near the fire seem to pulse with this light, their features emerging from and receding into shadow with each flicker. The oil lamps on some of the tables burn more steadily than candles, but their light has a different quality, slightly yellow, slightly oily. They occasionally smoke if the wick isn't properly trimmed, sending up thin trails of dark smoke that add to the general haze in the upper parts of the room. In this light, faces look different than they would in daylight, softer, more mysterious. The play of light and shadow accentuates some features, hides others. Everyone looks a little bit romantic, a little bit dramatic, touched by the poetry of lamplight. The late arrivals. The door opens, bringing a gust of cool air that makes the candles flutter and the fire brighten momentarily. Two men enter. They have the look of coachmen or wagoners, working men who spend their days on the road. They're dusty and tired, stamping their feet on the flagstones near the door to knock off the worst of the road dirt. The innkeeper greets them familiarly. They're clearly regulars, men who pass this way often enough to be known. There is an easy exchange of banter as they take their usual spots at a table near the door, well away from the coveted positions by the fire which they don't presume to claim. They order ale and food. "What's to eat tonight, John?" And the innkeeper's wife, overhearing, calls out from the kitchen that there's stew or cold meat pie, whichever they prefer. They choose stew. Naturally, it's a cold evening, and hot food appeals after hours on the road. As they wait for their meal, they talk not loudly, but with animation, about the state of the roads, about a bridge that needs repair, about a carter they encountered who'd gotten his wagon stuck. It's work talk, shop talk, the conversation of men in the same trade, comparing notes and sharing information that might be useful. Their arrival changes the atmosphere in the room slightly, not dramatically, but perceptibly. The room becomes a bit more social, a bit more public. The other guests glance over occasionally, half listening to the newcomer's conversation, anchoring themselves back in the world of roads and weather and practical concerns. The pipe smoker's ritual. The elderly man by the fire has finished relighting his pipe, and now he settles back into his contemplation of the flames. Let's watch him for a moment. This unhurried ritual of smoking. He draws on the pipe slowly, steadily. The tobacco in the bowl glows brighter with each draw, a tiny red eye in the dimness. He exhales, and a thin stream of white smoke rises upward, dispersing gradually into the general haze of the room. There's something almost meditative about his smoking. He's not reading, not talking, not doing anything else, just smoking, watching the fire, existing in the moment. Time for him has a different quality. He's not waiting for anything or hurrying toward anything. He's simply being. Occasionally, he uses the stem of his pipe to point at something in the fire, a log that he's burning particularly brightly, perhaps, or an interesting pattern in the coals. He might be talking to himself, offering quiet commentary on the fire's behavior, though he's too far away for you to hear clearly. His pipe is a long clay one, white and smooth, perhaps a foot long from bowl to stem. These clay pipes were common and relatively cheap. If one broke, you simply bought another. But this one looks well cared for, colored by use to a yellowish patina, the bowl slightly blackened from countless fires. The hour grows later gradually, subtly. The evening progresses into proper night. Outside the windows, what little light remained has faded completely. The windows now show only reflections of the interior, the fire, the candles, the ghostly shapes of people moving about. The two farmers or tradesmen who were talking earlier have finished their ale and are preparing to leave. They stand, stretch slightly, settle their hats on their heads. They bid the innkeeper good night. Night, John. Give you good night, and he returns the courtesy. The door opens, admits a breath of cold, closes again, and they're gone into the darkness. Their departure makes the room feel quieter, more intimate. The coachmen are still eating, but more slowly now, their earlier animation settling into the quiet satisfaction of tired men being fed. The woman who was reading has put her book away and sits simply looking at nothing in particular, her hands folded in her lap. She looks tired, not unhappy, but worn by whatever journey has brought her here. The younger man with the ledger has finished his calculations and packed away his papers. He's ordered another ale and is drinking it slowly while staring at the fire, his mind clearly elsewhere, perhaps on tomorrow's business, or perhaps on nothing at all, simply allowing himself to drift. Preparing for the night, the innkeeper approaches your table. Will you be wanting to see your room then? I can have my daughter show you up whenever you're ready. You indicate that yes, you're quite ready to retire. The meal has made you pleasantly drowsy, and the prospect of a bed is increasingly appealing. He nods and calls toward the kitchen. Mary, show our guest to the blue chamber, if you please. The young girl appears again, now carrying a chamber stick, a small candle holder with a handle, designed for carrying from room to room. The candle provides a small, personal pool of light. This way, please, she says politely, and leads you toward a staircase at the far end of the common room. The stairs are narrow and steep, the treads worn smooth by countless feet over the years. They creak underfoot, old wood settling, announcing your passage. The girl climbs confidently, her candle creating dancing shadows on the whitewashed walls. At the top of the stairs is a hallway, low-ceilinged and dim. There are several doors leading off at the guest chambers. She leads you to one of these, opens it, and enters to light additional candles from her own. The room is small but adequate, perhaps 10 feet by 12. The ceiling slopes downward where it follows the roofline, and you'd need to be careful not to bump your head if you're tall. The walls are whitewashed plaster, clean enough if not pristine. There's one window, smallish and fitted with heavy curtains that are already drawn against the night. A washstand stands against one wall, with a basin, and the ewer is filled with water for washing. But the center of the room, and its main feature, is the bed. It's substantial, a wooden frame with rope supports, on top of which rests a substantial mattress. The mattress is likely stuffed with wool, or perhaps even feathers if this is a better chamber. It's covered with sheets, coarse linen, but clean, and several blankets. The bed has curtains, heavy fabric hung from a frame that can be drawn closed around the bed. These serve multiple purposes. They help retain warmth in a cold room, they provide privacy if the room is shared, and they create a sense of enclosure, a nest-like space that feels safe and comfortable. The girl sets her candle down on a small table beside the bed. There's a chamber pot beneath the bed, she says matter-of-factly, and if you need anything, just call down the stairs. Father or mother will hear you. You thank her, and she bobs a small curtsy, half habit, half genuine politeness, and withdraws, closing the door softly behind her. Settling in, you're alone now in the small circle of candlelight. The sounds of the common room below are muted, but still audible voices, though you can't make out words, the occasional clink of pottery or pewter, footsteps on the floorboards. You move to the washstand and pour some water from the ewer into the basin. The water is cold. There is no hot water service in an ordinary coaching inn, but after a long day of travel, even cold water feels refreshing. You wash your hands and face, feeling the day's dust and weariness wash away. There's no mirror, or if there is, it's too small and dim to show much. You dry yourself on the rough towel provided, then turn your attention to preparing for bed. The process is simpler than it would be today. You remove your outer clothes, coat or cloak, waistcoat, outer skirts if you're a woman. You might sleep in your shirt and breeches if you're a man, in your shift if you're a woman. Sleeping completely unclothed would be unusual, partly for warmth, partly for modesty, partly simply because that's not how things were done. You fold your clothes and lay them over a chair. There's always a chair, even in modest chambers, specifically for this purpose. The bed. Now for the bed itself. You pull back the blankets, there are 3 of them, heavy wool, slightly rough but warm, and examine the sheets and mattress. They seem clean. No obvious signs of bedbugs or other vermin, though such things were an unfortunately common hazard of innkeeping in this era. You sit on the edge of the bed, and it gives slightly under your weight. The rope supports have some spring to them. The mattress is relatively soft, though lumpy in places where the filling has shifted or compressed unevenly over time. You swing your legs up and slide under the covers. The sheets are cold. They've been in this unheated room all day, but you know your body warmth will gradually warm them. You reach out and begin drawing the bed curtains closed. They slide on their rod with a soft rustling sound. As you pull them shut, the space within becomes increasingly enclosed, increasingly private. It's like creating a room within a room, your own small world of warmth and rest. When the curtains are fully closed, the quality of light changes. The candle still burns on the bedside table, and its light filters through the curtains, creating a soft, diffuse glow. You can see the weave of the fabric, can watch shadows play across it as the candle flame moves. From within this enclosed space, the sounds of the inn are even more muted. You can hear them, but they seem distant, as if they're happening in another world. There's something comforting about this, the knowledge that life continues, that you're safe within a functioning household, but that you're also separate from it, enclosed in your own private space. Night sounds. As you lie there, letting the day's tension drain from your body, you become aware of the various sounds that make up the nighttime life of the inn. Below, in the common room, you can hear someone walking across the floor, probably the innkeeper, making a final round before closing up for the night. You hear the scrape of a bench being pushed in, the clink of vessels being collected. Someone climbs the stairs, heavy footfalls. A man, certainly. One of those coachmen, perhaps, being shown to a neighboring chamber. You hear a door open and close, then silence. Outside, the wind continues to move through the trees around the inn. It's a gentle sound, almost musical, with occasional stronger gusts that make the building creak slightly, settling on its ancient timbers. A horse moves in the stable below. You can hear the thump of a hoof against wood, the rustle of straw. The sound is oddly comforting. Animals safely housed, cared for, resting just as you are. Somewhere in the inn, a clock chimes. It must be on the hour, though you're not certain which hour. 9, 10. The chimes are mellow, slightly flat, the sound of an old clock that's been chiming the hours for decades. From a distant room, perhaps down the hall, you hear a cough, quickly suppressed. Another traveler, another person seeking rest at the end of a long day. The dying candle. The candle on your bedside table is burning down. You watch it through the gap in the bed curtains, seeing the flame gradually shrink as the wax is consumed. The pool of melted wax in the chamber stick is growing larger, and the wick has developed a long, glowing tip that occasionally sparks and pops softly. You could snuff it out now. There's a candle snuffer on the table, a small cone-shaped device designed to extinguish candles without causing smoke or spattering wax, but instead, you let it burn. There's something peaceful about watching a candle burn down naturally, about the gentle fading of light. The flame grows smaller, smaller. The light in your enclosed space dims gradually, shadows deepening. The flame flutters, steadies, flutters again. And then, with the final small flicker, it goes out. The darkness is complete. Through the bed curtains, you can see absolutely nothing. But it's not a frightening darkness, it's soft, enfolding like a blanket of velvet. In this darkness, your other senses become more acute. You're more aware of the sounds, of the feeling of the sheets against your skin, of the warmth beginning to build under the blankets, of the faint smell of the extinguished candle, that distinctive scent of smoldering wick and cooling wax. Deep nighttime passes. You're drifting in that space between waking and sleep, aware but not fully conscious, thinking but not thinking clearly. Thoughts come and go like clouds, forming and dissipating without urgency or importance. The sounds of the inn grow fewer. The common room below has gone quiet, everyone has retired. Somewhere, someone is snoring softly, the sound just audible through walls and doors. The fire in the common room must be dying down now. The innkeeper will have banked it carefully, covering the coals with ash to slow their burning, ensuring that some embers will survive until morning. Tomorrow, he'll uncover them, add kindling and wood, coax the fire back to life. But for now, rests, glowing quietly in the darkness. The wind outside has settled somewhat. The night has reached that deep stillness that comes in the hours after midnight, when even the natural world seems to be resting. You feel yourself sinking deeper into the mattress, your body relaxing completely. The bed has warmed from your body heat, becoming a nest of comfortable warmth. The sheets no longer feel cold but neutral, neither hot nor cold, just perfectly comfortable. Your breathing has slowed, deepened. The boundary between yourself and sleep is dissolving. Soon, very soon, you'll cross over completely. Mornings approach somewhere in the depths of night. You sleep deeply, dreamlessly, or perhaps with dreams you won't remember. The inn around you sleeps too, or mostly sleeps. Perhaps the innkeeper rises once to check on the fire, to ensure all is secure, but then returns to his own bed. But gradually, perceptibly, the night begins its slow transition toward morning. The darkness, if you could see it, begins to thin slightly, becomes less absolute. The stars that shone so brightly earlier begin to fade as the eastern sky, still invisible from your curtained bed, begins to lighten from black to gray. The first sounds of morning begin. A rooster somewhere nearby, though distant, begins its crowing. Birds in the eaves of the inn begin to stir, making small rustling sounds. In the inn itself, someone rises, probably the innkeeper's wife, who has to begin preparing breakfast. You hear it very faintly, the sound of footsteps below, moving carefully, trying not to disturb the sleeping guests. You hear, or perhaps imagine you hear, the scrape of the ash being cleared from the fire, the crackle of kindling being added, the building sound of the fire coming back to life. But these sounds are distant, barely noticed. You're still deep in sleep, and morning, though approaching, has not yet arrived for you. The inn in historical context. Let's step back for a moment, out of this particular night, and into a broader understanding. The inn we've been visiting, what role did it play in 18th century life? Inns were absolutely crucial to the functioning of society in this period. Roads were the arteries of commerce and communication, and inns were the hearts that kept blood flowing through those arteries. Without inns, long-distance travel would have been nearly impossible for ordinary people. They provided not just accommodation, but also fresh horses for coaches and riders. Every 10 or 15 miles along major coaching routes, there would be an inn where tired horses could be exchanged for fresh ones. This system allowed coaches to maintain relatively good speeds over long distances. Inns were also social centers, places where news was exchanged and spread. A traveler from London might bring news of events in the capital. A merchant from the continent might share information about trade and commerce. These conversations, happening over ale and meals, formed a kind of informal network of information that helped knit the country together. Different inns catered to different classes of traveler. There were grand coaching inns in cities and major towns, with extensive stables, multiple private rooms, and refined service. These catered to the gentry and prosperous merchants. Then there were more modest establishments like the one we've been visiting, respectable, clean, adequate, serving the needs of ordinary travelers, minor tradesmen, farmers on business, servants traveling on their master's affairs. And below these were rough alehouses and poor inns, little more than a room with some benches and perhaps a loft to sleep in, serving the needs of the poorest travelers, laborers, and vagrants. The quality of inns varied enormously, and travelers of the period were often vocal in their complaints about poor accommodation, bad food, dirty linens, and high prices. But a good inn, run by honest and capable people, was a treasure, a place of genuine comfort and hospitality in a world where travel was difficult and often dangerous. The innkeeper's life. Let's think about the innkeeper and his family. What was their life like? Running an inn was demanding work, from before dawn until late at night. Someone had to be available at almost all hours to receive travelers, who might arrive at any time. Meals had to be prepared multiple times a day. Rooms had to be kept clean. Stables had to be maintained. Supplies had to be procured: food, ale, candles, wood for the fire. But it could also be profitable. A well-located inn on a busy coaching route could generate substantial income. The innkeeper might become one of the more prosperous members of his community, owning property, perhaps serving in local government. There was also a social dimension to the role. The innkeeper was a kind of bridge figure. He interacted with travelers from all walks of life, from lords to laborers. He heard news and gossip from far and wide. He was often a man of some education and sophistication, able to converse with gentlemen while still maintaining rapport with common folk. His wife was equally important to the success of the enterprise. She typically managed the domestic side: the cooking, the cleaning, the management of servants if there were any, the preparation of rooms. She had to be capable, organized, and diplomatic, dealing with demanding guests and difficult situations. Children growing up in an inn learned the trade from earliest childhood, just as we saw with the daughter carrying wood and showing guests to their rooms. They might eventually take over the inn themselves, or marry into other innkeeping families, or use the skills and connections they developed to establish themselves in related trades. The travelers. Let's think about the various kinds of travelers who might pass through an inn like this. There were merchants and tradesmen traveling to buy and sell goods, to meet with customers and suppliers. They might carry samples of their wares: cloth merchants with swatches of fabric, pottery sellers with carefully packed examples of their products, metalsmiths with their tools and finished pieces. There were servants and stewards, traveling on their employer's business, carrying messages, delivering documents, making payments, arranging affairs. They occupied an interesting social position, often more educated and sophisticated than their class position would suggest, but still ultimately dependent on their employers. There were professional travelers: the coachmen and wagoners we met, who spent most of their lives on the road, who knew every inn and every mile of the routes they traveled. They formed a kind of fraternity, these roadmen, with their own culture and shared knowledge. There were farmers and countryfolk traveling to market, to fairs, to visit family in distant villages. For many of them, a night at an inn was a rare luxury, something done only when necessary for business or important family occasions. There were gentlemen and ladies on journeys, traveling to London on business, visiting country estates, going to take the waters at Bath or other spa towns. They expected and received better service, private rooms if available, superior food and drink. There were soldiers on the move, though in peacetime they were less common. Discharged veterans sometimes became semi-permanent travelers, moving from place to place, picking up work where they could, sleeping rough when they had to, but preferring the comfort of an inn when they could afford it. And there were those on the margins: vagrants, wandering poor, traveling entertainers, peddlers with dubious wares. Innkeepers had to navigate these carefully, balancing Christian charity and the requirement to provide hospitality against the need to maintain a respectable establishment and protect their other guests. Food and drink. Let's return to the more sensory aspects of inn life and think about the food and drink more deeply. The food at an ordinary coaching inn was simple but substantial. Meat when available: mutton, beef, pork, chicken. Often, this would be prepared as a stew or pottage, as we saw, because these dishes could be kept warm over the fire and served to guests as they arrived, without requiring individual preparation. Pies were common: meat pies, both hot and cold. A cold meat pie could be made in large batches and would keep for several days, making it economical and convenient. Hot pies might be made fresh for dinner service. Roasted meats were available at better inns or for wealthier customers willing to pay extra. A joint of meat turning on a spit over the fire. This was more prestigious food, requiring more attention and preparation. Vegetables appeared in stews and pottages: turnips, carrots, onions, parsnips, cabbage. These were often from the inn's own garden or purchased from local farmers. Root vegetables were especially common because they kept well and were available even in winter. Bread was omnipresent: brown bread, coarse and substantial, sometimes white bread for better customers. It served multiple purposes as food itself, as trenchers to hold other food, as a way to soak up sauces and gravies. Cheese and butter were common, both being relatively stable foods that could be stored without spoilage for reasonable periods. As for drink, ale was the standard beverage. It was safer than water, which might be contaminated, and provided calories and some nutrition along with modest alcoholic content. Each inn brewed its own or purchased from a local brewer, and the quality varied enormously. Cider was common in apple-growing regions, and some inns might offer wine, though this was more expensive and typically reserved for wealthier guests. Coffee and tea were becoming more common by the late 18th century, at least in towns and cities, but they were still luxury items, and a rural coaching inn might not offer them at all, or only at significant extra cost. The social dynamics. The common room of an inn was a fascinating social space because it brought together people who would normally be separated by class and circumstance. A gentleman might find himself sitting near a laborer. A lady might be in the same room as a servant. Normally, these groups would occupy completely separate social spheres, but the inn created a kind of temporary, liminal space where the usual rules were slightly relaxed. This didn't mean equality, of course. Better customers still received better service, better food, better accommodation. They still expected and received deference from social inferiors, but there was a level of mixing, of proximity, that was unusual in ordinary 18th century life. This could create tension. Some genteel travelers were uncomfortable with the mixing, with the need to share space with those they considered beneath them. Inn journals and travel diaries of the period often complain about the rudeness of other guests, the noise, the lack of proper respect. But it could also create a kind of camaraderie, the shared experience of travel, the common relief at finding shelter and sustenance, could break down barriers. Conversations might spring up between people who would never normally speak. Stories and news would be shared across social boundaries. The innkeeper had to manage these dynamics carefully. He had to ensure that better customers felt appropriately served and respected, while not treating poorer customers so badly that they were driven away or caused trouble. It required diplomatic skill and social intelligence. Warmth and light. Let's return to those fundamental comforts, warmth and light, and think about what they meant in this period. In an era before central heating, before electric light, warmth and light were precious commodities, produced with effort and expense. The fire in the common room represented a significant investment. Someone had to cut or purchase the wood, transport it, stack it, tend the fire constantly to keep it burning properly. The position near the fire was therefore a privileged one. Regular customers, local people who came to the inn evening after evening, often had their established places near the hearth. Newcomers, travelers just passing through, understood that these places were taken, part of the inn's social geography, but everyone in the common room benefited from the fire's warmth. The room was heated communally, and in this way, the fire became a kind of social equalizer. Its warmth extended to all present, regardless of their ability to pay for premium positions. Light, too, was precious. Candles were expensive, made from tallow or, for better quality, from beeswax. They had to be purchased or made, and they burned down steadily, requiring constant replacement. The innkeeper had to balance the need to provide adequate light for guest comfort and safety against the expense of candles. Oil lamps were more economical for long-term illumination, but they required maintenance. Wicks needed trimming, reservoirs needed filling, and they could smoke if not properly tended. The result was that illumination was selective, concentrated where it was most needed, on tables where people were eating or reading, near the door for safety. Other areas of the room remained in shadow, creating that characteristic atmosphere of pools of light in surrounding darkness. Sleep and rest. Let's think about sleep itself in this period, what it was like, how it differed from our experience. Sleep in the 18th century often followed a different pattern than what we consider normal today. There's evidence that many people practiced segmented sleep, sleeping for several hours, waking for an hour or two in the middle of the night, then sleeping again until morning. During that wakeful period, people might pray, think, talk quietly with a bed partner, or attend to various needs. This pattern was so common that it was barely remarked upon was simply how sleep worked for many people. The darkness of night was more complete than we can easily imagine. Without streetlights, without light pollution, without electric devices glowing in the darkness, night was truly dark. Once candles and fires were extinguished, the darkness was absolute, except for moonlight, if the moon was up and the sky was clear. This darkness shaped the experience of waking in the night. You couldn't simply flip a switch and have instant light. If you needed light, you had to fumble for flint and steel, strike sparks, coax a candle into flame, a process that took time and effort. Often, people simply remained in darkness, waiting for their eyes to adjust, navigating by memory and touch. Sleep was also more communal than it is for us. Sharing a bed was common. Spouses naturally, but also same-sex travelers might share a bed to reduce costs. Children slept multiple to a bed. Servants might sleep in the same room as their employers. This meant that sleep was less private, less individual than we're accustomed to. You might be awakened by your bed partner's movements, their snoring, their need to rise in the night. Conversely, your own sleep would be affected by the presence of another warm body, the shared warmth under the covers, the unavoidable physical intimacy of shared sleeping space. Morning awakening. Let's imagine the morning now. You've slept deeply through most of the night, and now you're drifting up toward consciousness. The process is gradual, gentle. First, you become aware of sounds. Birdsong outside, it's quite loud now. A full chorus of morning birds. Footsteps below in the common room, multiple people moving about. The clatter of pottery and pewter, breakfast preparations. Voices, though still low and quiet, people speaking in morning voices, not yet fully awake themselves. Then you become aware of light. Through the bed curtains, you can see that they're no longer uniformly dark. Light is filtering through daylight, gray and dim still, but unmistakably daylight. Morning has arrived. You lie still for a moment, warm under the blankets, not quite ready to face the day. The bed has become a nest of warmth over the night, and emerging into the cooler air of the room will require a small act of will. But eventually, you stir, you push back the bed curtains, and cooler air touches your face. The room is dim, the curtains over the window are still drawn, but there's enough light to see by. You sit up, swing your legs over the edge of the bed, feet touching the cold floor. The chill is bracing, waking. You stand, move to the window, pull back the curtain. Outside, the world is revealed in early morning light. The sky is overcast, gray, with perhaps a hint of brightness in the east, where the sun is rising behind the clouds. The inn yard is visible below the stable, the coaching house, a few chickens pecking in the dirt. Everything looks clean and new in the morning light, washed by the night's darkness. Morning preparations. You turn to your washing. The water in the ewer is very cold now. It's been sitting in the unheated room all night. You pour some into the basin and splash it on your face. The cold is shocking, but it completes the waking process, drives away any lingering drowsiness. You dry yourself and begin to dress. Your clothes are where you left them, draped over the chair. They're cold too, and slightly stiff, but you put them on piece by piece, layer by layer, until you're fully dressed and ready to face the day. You hear footsteps on the stairs, then a gentle knock at your door. "Good morning," comes the innkeeper's wife's voice. "Breakfast is ready when you're ready to come down." You call back your thanks, give yourself a final check, everything in order, and move to the door. As you open it and step into the hallway, you smell breakfast cooking, porridge, perhaps, and bread toasting near the fire. Coffee or tea brewing, if the inn offers such luxuries. The smells are homely, welcoming, promising sustenance and warmth. You descend the stairs. They're just as narrow and steep as they were last night, but easier to navigate in daylight. At the bottom, you emerge into the common room, and it's like entering a different world from last night's. The morning room, the common room in morning light, has a completely different character. What was mysterious and romantic in lamplight is now revealed as ordinary and practical, but no less welcoming for that. The fire has been built up again and burns brightly, driving away the morning chill. The windows are uncurtained, and gray daylight floods in, supplementing the firelight. Everything is visible, clear, defined in a way it wasn't by night. The tables have been cleared and reset for breakfast. Fresh sawdust has been scattered on the floor. You notice this detail that was invisible last night. The room smells of smoke and food and fresh air from the door being opened and closed as people come and go. There are fewer guests visible than there were last night. Some have already departed, early risers who have breakfasted and returned to the road. But new guests have arrived too. A coach must have come in early morning, and several passengers are sitting at a large table, bleary-eyed, eating breakfast before continuing their journey. The innkeeper greets you, just as professional in the morning as he was last night, though perhaps more brisk. Morning is a busy time, with multiple guests to serve, departures to manage, new arrivals to accommodate. Good morning. Sleep well, did you? Sit where you like. Breakfast is porridge or bread and butter, with small beer or milk. There's cold meat as well if you want something more substantial. You choose a table and sit. The innkeeper's wife brings you a bowl of porridge, thick and creamy, with a small pool of butter melting on top. There's bread too, and a small pot of honey for sweetening the porridge, if you like. The food is simple but good. The porridge is warming and filling, perfect for a cold morning. The bread is from yesterday's baking, slightly firmer than it would have been fresh, but still good, especially with butter. Departures and arrivals. As you eat, you watch the comings and goings of the inn. A family is departing: mother, father, 3 children, all bundled up against the cold. They're local people perhaps, who stayed the night for some family occasion. The children are sleepy and fractious, and the mother is trying to organize them while the father settles the bill with the innkeeper. In the inn yard outside, visible through the window, ostlers are bringing horses from the stable, harnessing them to a coach. The coachman is checking harness and wheels, doing his morning inspection before departure. Luggage is being loaded onto the coach's roof and strapped down securely. A new guest arrives: a lone rider, dusty from the road, leading his horse. He'll be wanting breakfast and perhaps a room if he's staying, or just a rest and a meal if he's continuing on. The innkeeper greets him, and the conversation about what he needs begins. There's a constant flow, you realize. An inn is never static. People are always arriving, always departing. It's a place of transition, of passage, where people pause briefly in their journeys before moving on. But for the inn itself, for the innkeeper and his family, this is permanent. This is their life, their home. They watch hundreds, thousands of people pass through, year after year, while they remain constant, providing this service, maintaining this space. Settling accounts. When you've finished breakfast, it's time to settle your bill. The innkeeper brings out his ledger, a large book where he records all transactions. He runs his finger down the page, tallying up your charges. Let's see then. 1 bed in the blue chamber, that's 6 pence. Supper, the stew and ale, that's 4 pence. Breakfast this morning, 2 pence. Stabling for your horse, but perhaps you haven't a horse, so that's struck from the list. Total comes to 1 shilling. The price seems fair. You count out the coins, shillings and pence in copper and silver, worn smooth from countless transactions. The innkeeper accepts them, makes a notation in his ledger, and wishes you well. Safe travels to you. If you're coming back this way, we'll be glad to see you again. It's a standard farewell, but there's genuine warmth in it. You've been a good guest, paid promptly, caused no trouble, treated his family and establishment with respect. You're welcome to return. You gather your belongings, make your final preparations for departure. The common room, which has been your shelter and refuge for the night, is already moving on to serve others. Your brief residence here is ending, as it must. Stepping out, you move to the door, pull it open. The outside air is cold and damp. It may rain later. The sky is still gray, but lighter now, and there are breaks in the clouds where pale sunlight tries to push through. The road stretches away in both directions, rutted and unpredictable. Whichever way you're going, it will be miles before the next town, the next inn, the next moment of rest. But you're refreshed from your night's sleep, fed from breakfast, ready to continue your journey. The inn has done its job. It has provided shelter, sustenance, rest. It has been a haven in the midst of travel, A moment of comfort between one place and another. You step out, and the door closes behind you. The inn remains, ready for the next traveler, the next person seeking shelter as night falls, and the road becomes uncertain. The timelessness of hospitality. Let's step back once more, out of this particular morning, and think about the larger patterns we've observed. The hospitality of the inn, this practice of providing shelter, food, and rest to strangers, is one of the oldest human activities. It appears in literature and history going back thousands of years. The ancient Greeks considered hospitality sacred, protected by the gods. Medieval Christian doctrine made caring for travelers a religious duty. The Old Testament is full of injunctions to welcome the stranger. The inn we visited exists in a particular time and place, 18th century England, but it is part of this much longer tradition. The specifics have changed, the styles of building, the types of food, the methods of lighting and heating, but the fundamental purpose remains constant. A traveler, far from home, needs rest. An innkeeper provides it. This simple transaction, repeated millions of times across centuries, has been one of the threads holding human society together, making travel possible, allowing commerce and communication and cultural exchange. Even today, in our world of hotels and motels and air conditioning and Wi-Fi, the basic pattern persists. We travel, we tire, we seek shelter. Someone provides it. We pay, we rest. We continue on our way. The technology has changed dramatically, but the human needs and the human response to those needs remain recognizable. There's something deeply reassuring about this continuity, about the way certain patterns persist across time. It connects us to our ancestors, reminds us that we're part of a long chain of human experience. The value of slowness. We've spent hours now exploring a single night at an inn. We've looked at meals and fires, at beds and sleep, at the small details of hospitality and rest. We've moved slowly, taken our time, let each moment unfold naturally. This is, of course, very different from how we usually experience history. Typically, history is about great events, important people, decisive moments, battles and coronations, discoveries and revolutions. Those things have their place, certainly. But there's also value in this slower approach, in looking at the ordinary and everyday, because this is how most people, in most times, have actually lived their lives, not in great dramatic moments, but in the daily round of small tasks and simple pleasures. Making a meal, tending a fire, preparing a bed, welcoming a stranger. These aren't dramatic, but they're fundamental. They're the stuff of actual lived experience, the texture of real life. And there's something calming about contemplating them, about taking the time to really see and understand these simple activities. In our fast-paced world, where everything pushes us to hurry, to multitask, to cram more into less time, there's value in deliberately slowing down, in giving our attention fully to one thing, even if that thing is as simple as watching a candle burn down or imagining the feel of clean sheets. The inn in memory. For the travelers who pass through inns like the one we visited, these places became part of their personal geography, their mental map of the world. Ah yes, the Red Lion near Northampton, I stayed there once. Good plain food, clean beds, honest innkeeper, or perhaps, that terrible place on the York Road, damp sheets, watered ale, charged me twice what it was worth. Never again. These memories accumulated, were shared, became part of collective knowledge. Good inns developed reputations that brought more business. Poor inns were avoided, might eventually fail. But beyond matters of business and reputation, these places existed in memory as markers, as reference points. It was about 5 years ago, I remember, because I was traveling to my brother's wedding, and I stayed at that inn with the green shutters. The inn becomes a setting for memory, a stage where life's small dramas played out. Perhaps you met someone interesting in a common room. Perhaps you received important news while staying at an inn. Perhaps you were ill and the innkeeper's wife cared for you with unexpected kindness. These memories, multiplied across millions of travelers over centuries, created a vast web of experience and connection, all centered on these humble buildings with their fires and beds and simple hospitality. Evening returns. Let's return now to our inn, to the evening time, to that gentle hour when day transitions into night. We began there, and we can end there too, watching the cycle complete itself. Evening comes again. The sun, which rose this morning, now sets again. The western sky glows orange and red, then purple, then slowly fades to black. Stars emerge, one by one, until the sky is filled with them. On the road, a new traveler appears, tired from the day's journey, seeking shelter. They see the warm glow of the inn's windows, hear the murmur of voices, smell the wood smoke and cooking food. They approach the door, grasp the latch, push it open, and step into the warmth and light. The innkeeper looks up, sees another guest arriving, and moves forward with his professional welcome. "Good evening to you. Welcome to the Red Lion." And the cycle begins again. Another night, another set of guests, another round of meals and conversations and rest. The inn continues its eternal work, providing hospitality, offering shelter, maintaining this small island of warmth and safety in the midst of the dark countryside. The fire burns on the hearth, as it has burned countless nights before, as it will burn countless nights to come. The candles are lit, the tables are set, the beds are made ready. The inn waits, patient and welcoming, ready to receive whoever might come seeking shelter in the night. Reflections on rest. What is it about rest that makes it so precious? Why does the simple act of stopping, pausing in our journey mean so much? Perhaps it's contrast. The inn feels warm because we've been cold. The bed feels soft because we've been walking. The food tastes good because we've been hungry. Rest is sweet because we've been in motion, been working, been striving. But it's more than just physical relief. Rest offers a kind of mental and emotional respite as well. When we're traveling, when we're working toward a goal, part of our mind is always ahead of us, planning, anticipating, worrying about what comes next. But in the inn, for those few hours of evening and night, we can let go of that forward momentum. We can simply be present here now. The future will come soon enough, but for this moment, we can set it aside. This is what the inn offers, ultimately not just a bed and a meal, but permission to stop, to rest, to simply exist without purpose or plan for a few hours. In a world that constantly demands movement and productivity, this is a rare and valuable gift. The eternal return. There's a beautiful pattern in the way inns work the same activities repeated night after night, season after season, year after year. The fire is lit, the meal is cooked, the beds are prepared, guests arrive, eat, sleep, depart, and then it all happens again. This repetition might seem monotonous, but there's something deeply satisfying about it too. It's like the rhythm of the seasons, or the cycle of day and night patterns, so fundamental that they structure our experience of time itself. For the innkeeper and his family, this repetition is their life. They might tire of it sometimes, might wish for variety or change, but there's also security in it, meaning in it. They're providing an essential service, doing work that matters, maintaining patterns that have existed for centuries. For the guests, each visit might be unique, a particular journey, a specific purpose, a memorable moment. But they're also participating in this larger pattern, becoming part of the inn's endless cycle of welcome and farewell. We've spent a long time now in this 18th century inn, exploring its rhythms and routines, its comforts and customs. We've watched evening turn to night and night turn to morning. We've sat by the fire, eaten simple food, slept in a curtained bed, and watch the daily life of hospitality unfold. What do we take from this journey? Perhaps a sense of connection to the past, an understanding that the fundamental human needs for warmth, for food, for shelter, for rest haven't changed even as the world has changed around them. Perhaps an appreciation for the simple comforts we often take for granted, the ease of warmth at the touch of a thermostat, the abundance of light from a switch, the privacy and cleanliness of modern accommodation. Perhaps, too, a kind of nostalgia for a slower pace, for a time when night was truly night, when rest meant genuine cessation of activity, when travel was a significant undertaking that gave real meaning to arrival and rest. But mostly, perhaps, we take a sense of peace. There's something deeply calming about these glimpses into the past, about contemplating the quiet routines of ordinary life, about taking time to really see and appreciate the simple things. The inn stands as it has stood for centuries, a place of welcome, a provider of hospitality, a shelter in the night. The fire burns on the hearth. The door stands ready to open for the next traveler. The beds wait, clean and ready, for tired bodies to find rest. And in imagining this, in taking this slow journey through a single night in an inn, perhaps we found a little rest ourselves. Thank you for spending this time with me, settling into the gentle rhythms of inn life in the 18th century. I hope you found it peaceful, perhaps even restful, a chance to slow down and step into a different world, a quieter time. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, there are many more to take. Other places, other times, other quiet corners of history waiting to be explored. But for now, rest well. May your dreams be as comfortable as a curtained bed, as warm as an inn's hearth fire, as peaceful as a quiet evening in a country tavern. Good night.